We think our lives are shaped by big decisions, the job we choose, the person we love, the moments we break or rise. But the truth is, your life is shaped far more by what you do in silence, by what you repeat, without applause, by what you choose when no one is watching. That's where character is built, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows of your routine. You want to know who you are. Look at your habits, not your intentions, not your dreams, your habits. Because it's not what you feel once that matters, it's what you do over and over again. The Stoics knew this. They didn't wait for motivation, they built systems. They trained their bodies, their minds, their values, not with intensity, but with consistency. This episode is not about changing your life overnight. It's about learning the quiet power of what you repeat, the things you commit to daily, the rituals that align you with your highest self, and the discipline to keep showing up even when the world isn't watching. Let's talk about what really shapes your destiny, the habits you live by. Habits build your character. When people think of character, they often imagine dramatic choices, acts of bravery, moments of truth. The decision to stand up when everyone else stays quiet. And yes, those moments matter, but they're not where character begins. Character is not something you summon once in a crisis. It's something you build quietly, slowly, through repetition, through habit. The Stoics believe that who you are is not what you claim, it's what you practice. You don't become disciplined by reading about discipline. You don't become wise by admiring wisdom. You build those traits through action, small, repeated, often invisible action. You wake up and you do what needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not, and you do it again the next day and the next. That's how character forms, not in decorations, but in the mundane. Let's be honest, most people overestimate the power of single decisions and underestimate the power of repetition. You can't meditate once and become calm. You can't read one book and become enlightened. You can't eat one healthy meal and call yourself disciplined. It's what you do consistently that defines you. And often it's what you do when no one's watching that shapes you the most. Think about this: every habit you have, whether helpful or harmful, is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. When you choose to wake up early, when you resist that impulse to scroll, when you speak with kindness instead of sarcasm, when you take the stairs instead of the elevator, you are casting votes for strength, clarity, and discipline. And over time, those votes accumulate. They become your identity. They become your reputation, not just in the eyes of others, but in the quiet honesty of your own self-respect. The Stoics trained themselves daily. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal every morning and evening, not for others, but to examine his mind. Epictetus reminded his students that philosophy isn't theory, it's habit. He said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." And the way you embody something is by doing it again and again until it becomes who you are. But let's be clear, building character through habit isn't about perfection. You'll slip, you'll miss days, you'll have setbacks. That doesn't erase your progress. The Stoic doesn't demand flawlessness. He returns, he resets, he begins again without self-pity, without excuses. Because discipline is not about never falling. It's about always returning to the path. And this is where many people get stuck. They wait for motivation. They think character is built when they feel inspired, energized, or in the zone. But the truth is, character is built in the opposite moments, when you feel tired, unfocused, unmotivated, and you still show up. You still do the work. That's when the habit gets stronger. That's when your inner identity begins to shift from someone who tries to someone who is. Look around your life. Every result you see, the peace you have, the focus you feel, the confidence you carry, it all stems from habits, not one-time decisions, but daily ones. And if you want to become someone better, wiser, calmer, more disciplined, you don't need to change everything. You just need to start doing small things consistently. Because character isn't something you earn, It's something you train every day through what you choose, what you repeat, and what you refuse to compromise on. Your habits are building you right now. The only question is, are they building the person you want to become? Identity grows from repeated action. We often think identity is something we discover, that it's hidden somewhere deep inside us, waiting to be uncovered. But the truth is far more empowering and far more challenging. Identity is not found, it's built. And it's built through repetition, through the small, consistent actions you take every single day. You are not what you say you'll do. You are what you consistently do. And over time, your actions send a message not just to the world, but to yourself. That message becomes belief. That belief becomes identity. You don't become confident by reciting affirmations. You become confident by keeping your word, by doing hard things, by proving to yourself again and again that you are capable, resilient, and trustworthy. This is something the Stoics understood long before modern psychology gave it language. They didn't talk about self-image, they talked about self-discipline. They didn't focus on personality types, they focused on daily action, because they knew the only way to shape who you are is through what you practice. Let's say you want to be someone who's calm under pressure. You won't get there by reading quotes about peace. You'll get there by practicing stillness when things go wrong, by slowing your breath in moments of stress, by learning to pause instead of panic. Every time you do that, you reinforce a new identity, a new way of being. And here's the beautiful part: identity is not fixed. You're not stuck with the version of yourself that's anxious, reactive, or inconsistent. That's just the version you've practiced. If you want to change, you don't need to rewrite your entire life. You just need to practice a new pattern repeatedly, consistently, patiently. Think of a sculptor working with stone. He doesn't swing once and expect a masterpiece. He chisels day after day, guided by vision, shaped by discipline. That's what building identity feels like. It's not glamorous, it's not instant, but it's real and it's lasting. There's a dangerous myth in our culture that we need to feel like the person we want to become before we act like them. That we need confidence before we speak up, discipline before we start, clarity before we move. But the Stoic flips that completely: action first, identity second. You act like the person you want to be, and eventually your mind catches up. That's why the habits you repeat matter so much, because every action is evidence. And when the evidence piles up, belief follows. I showed up today. I stayed calm. I stayed focused. I didn't quit. That's how you build a new self-image, not through force, but through practice. So ask yourself, what identity are your habits reinforcing? Every time you scroll mindlessly, speak out of impulse, skip the work you promised yourself, you're reinforcing one version of yourself. And every time you follow through, even in a small way, you're reinforcing another identity. Isn't who you say you are, it's who you prove you are with every repeated choice. Choose simplicity over motivation. Motivation is unreliable. It's a mood, fleeting, unpredictable, dependent on energy, weather, sleep, or even a passing comment from someone else. If you rely on motivation to build your life, you'll only act when conditions are ideal. And that's not where transformation happens. Transformation is born in the mundane, in the repetition, in simplicity. That's why the Stoic doesn't chase motivation. He designs a life around simplicity, around action, because simplicity is stable. It doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't require inspiration. It just says, here's the task, do it. That might sound cold to some, but it's liberating. When you remove the emotional drama from action, you free yourself. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to wait for a sign. You just need a simple system, one that you can repeat regardless of mood. Take something as basic as waking up early. If your routine depends on feeling inspired to start the day, you'll hit snooze half the time. But if you decide this is when I get up no matter what, and you make the process simple, predictable, even automatic, suddenly it's no longer a debate. It's just who you are, and that's powerful. The Stoics weren't romantic about change. They were practical. They believed in stripping away anything unnecessary. Emotions have their place, but they don't belong at the wheel when it comes to habit formation. Marcus Aurelius woke up every day, reminding himself of one thing: you were born to do this. Why are you still lying in bed? Not because he felt like jumping out of bed, but because duty doesn't wait for motivation. Simplicity is what carries you through the days. You don't feel like it when the weather is bad, when your mind is foggy, when you feel disconnected. A complicated system collapses under pressure, but a simple habit endures. It asks for very little and gives back everything. So how do you apply this? Remove friction. Make the right action easier to start. Want to read more? Keep the book on your bed. Want to write? Open your laptop before you sleep, so it's waiting in the morning. Want to meditate? Sit in the same chair at the same time every day, no questions asked. You don't need motivation, you need less friction. The more complex your process, the more excuses you'll find not to follow through. But if your system is simple, I do this thing at this time in this way, there's no space for debate, no emotional loopholes, just the habit, just the rhythm. And over time, that rhythm becomes identity. Simplicity is not about doing less. It's about reducing resistance to what matters most. And the more resistance you remove, the more likely you are to follow through. Because you don't rise to the level of your motivation, you fall to the level of your systems. So stop chasing the perfect morning routine, the perfect workout plan, the ideal mindset. Ask instead, what is simple enough that I can do it every single day, no matter what? Because that's what changes your life, not motivation. Simplicity. Design your environment for discipline. Discipline isn't just about willpower, it's about structure. And one of the most overlooked sources of structure is your environment. The Stoics understood that the mind is deeply influenced by its surroundings. So instead of relying only on inner strength, they shaped the world around them to support their values. Because if your environment pulls you toward distraction, no amount of discipline will save you. But if it supports your intentions, effort becomes ease. Look around you. Right now, what does your space reflect? Chaos, clarity, comfort, or growth? Because your environment isn't neutral. It nudges you constantly toward patterns, behaviors, and emotions. The clutter on your desk, the noise in your home, the apps on your phone, the people in your circle, they all shape your habits more than you realize. Modern research echoes this ancient wisdom. Studies show that people eat less when food is out of sight, that productivity rises in clean, quiet spaces, that we're more likely to stick to new behaviors when our physical surroundings are designed for them. So why do we keep blaming ourselves for failure when our environment is setting us up for it? If you want to read more, put the book where you'll see it, not buried behind a screen. If you want to stop scrolling, remove the temptation log out, turn off notifications, even delete the app. If you want to wake up early, set your alarm across the room and place your clothes where you'll trip over them. These aren't hacks. They're boundaries, physical signals that align the outside world with your inner goals. Epictetus once told his students, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That doesn't just mean socially. It means simplifying your surroundings to the point where others may not understand. Maybe you don't decorate like everyone else. Maybe your workspace is plain. Maybe your phone is boring. Good discipline is not about impressing others. It's about supporting yourself. Think of a monk in a monastery. Their environment is designed for silence, clarity, and ritual. It removes distraction. It reinforces intention. You don't need to live like a monk, but you can create your own version of a disciplined space, a place that reminds you of who you're trying to become, not just what you're tempted to escape into. But it's not just about physical space. It's also about the people you let into it. If your environment is full of drama, gossip, or chaos, don't be surprised if your habits fall apart. Surround yourself with people who live the way you want to live, not perfectly but deliberately, because discipline is contagious, and so is carelessness. When you design your environment with purpose, discipline becomes less of a fight and more of a flow. You no longer have to push through every day. You just follow the path you've already cleared. That's what the Stoics understood. If you want to change your behavior, don't just change your mind, change your world. So don't wait to feel ready. Don't rely on willpower. Start by asking a simple question. Is my environment working for me or against me? Then start reshaping it. One object, one habit, one decision at a time. Because the most disciplined people aren't always stronger. They're just smarter about where they live, what they see, and what they allow near their attention. What you repeat, you become. We often look at personal growth as something that happens in bursts, after a breakthrough, a life event, or a moment of clarity. But real growth is rarely loud. It's quiet, subtle, almost invisible, and it happens through repetition, through what you do daily, not occasionally. Because every action you repeat carves a groove in who you are, and eventually that groove becomes identity. This is a truth the Stoics lived by not once, not sometimes, but constantly. They believed that the human mind, like water on stone, is shaped by whatever runs through it most often. So if your days are filled with anger, reactivity, distraction, don't be surprised when your character reflects those traits, not because you were born that way, but because you practice them even unintentionally. But the good news is this also works in your favor. If you begin to repeat calmness, patience, discipline, even in the smallest ways, those traits begin to replace the old ones. You don't have to feel transformed on day one. You just need to start repeating what you want to become. Let's take a simple example. If you start journaling every morning, even for 5 minutes, you're not just capturing thoughts. You're training your brain to pause, to reflect, to slow down before reacting. And if you repeat that often enough, something shifts, not just in your morning, but in your mindset. You become someone who listens before speaking, who thinks before acting, not because of a single moment of insight, but because of daily repetition. The problem is most people don't see results fast enough, so they quit. They tell themselves the new habit isn't working. But what they really mean is, I haven't done it long enough to see who I'm becoming. Because repetition doesn't shout, it whispers. And if you're not listening, you'll miss the quiet transformation. Every time you practice self-restraint, you train a more composed version of you. Every time you speak with intention, you build a more thoughtful version of you. Every time you show up, even when you don't feel like it, you hardwire a more reliable version of you. And with time, those repetitions form a new default. Not a fantasy version of who you hope to be, but a lived, tested, proven version of who you've practiced being. Seneca once said, "We become brave by doing brave things, not by waiting for courage to appear, not by hoping it grows from nowhere, but by repeating the action until it becomes natural." That's the Stoic path: repetition with awareness, action with intention. So if you're wondering how to change, don't wait for a big leap. Look at your repetitions. What are you doing every day without noticing? What are you repeating that's shaping your tone, your choices, your energy? And most importantly, what new thing could you begin to repeat today? Because you don't become disciplined in theory. You become disciplined in motion, one repetition at a time, one choice at a time. In the end, you're not what you say you want to be. You're what you keep choosing to become. Small actions create massive shifts. When people feel stuck in life, they often think they need to make a huge move. Quit everything, start over, make some grand gesture to reset their path. But the Stoic understands something different. Real change doesn't begin with extremes. It begins with small, deliberate actions repeated consistently, the kind of actions that seem almost too simple to matter until they start reshaping everything. Because it's not the size of the action that matters, it's the direction. Every time you wake up and choose to make your bed, you're reinforcing order. Every time you go for a 10-minute walk instead of scrolling your phone, you're shifting from passivity to engagement. Every time you pause to breathe before reacting, you're building emotional stability. These are small actions, but over time they create massive shifts in who you are, how you think, and how you move through the world. The Stoics were masters of microaction. They didn't preach about overhauling your life overnight. They taught self-governance in the moment, in how you rise, how you eat, how you work, how you speak. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that even emperors have to begin with small efforts. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That doesn't happen through grand plans. It happens through movement, small steps that meet resistance with presence. The beauty of small actions is that they bypass the overwhelm. You don't have to figure out the whole staircase. You just take the next step. You don't need to become the perfect version of yourself today. You just need to make one small choice that aligns with who you want to become. And if you repeat that enough times, the shift is inevitable. Let's say you're trying to change your relationship with your health or your time or your mindset. You don't need to wake up at 400 a.m., run 10 miles, write a book, and meditate for an hour. That kind of pressure leads to burnout. Instead, wake up 15 minutes earlier, stretch, read one page, write one honest sentence in a journal, drink a glass of water. These are not revolutionary by themselves, but they send a message: I am showing up. And that message, when repeated, creates momentum. Most people underestimate the power of daily proof. They want the transformation without the process. But transformation is just a result, and the process is always built from small bricks. Miss one day, nothing changes. Miss 20 days, your old identity comes back. Stick with it for 90 days, and suddenly you don't even recognize the person you used to be. And this truth works both ways. If you neglect the small things, the decline is just as real. 5 extra minutes of distraction turns into an hour of avoidance. Skipping one task becomes skipping the whole day. And before you know it, small decisions have led to big consequences. That's why Stoicism emphasizes presence, because the small moment is the big one if you treat it that way. So the question is, what small action can you take today, right now, that moves you 1 inch closer to strength, to clarity, to self-respect? You don't need a revolution. You need repetition. Tiny choices done with intention. That's where the shift begins.